How often are you in line for the Snow White ride?
I'm a narcissist.
Watching the rise and fall of a career is a fascinating experience, especially if it's one of a Hollywood star. It happens over and over again. For any number of reasons, a celebrity star might come crashing to earth, and rest assured, as many people who are there to cheer them on during their rise, there will be twice as many there for the fall. A life of luxury and riches captured our societal mind decades ago and never let go. The allure of fame and fortune is a pervasive force in American culture and, by and large, Western society. It has changed over time. 50 years ago, people may have been more inclined to say they wanted to be a movie star. Now, with the world becoming more invasive, less people want to become actors. But that doesn't mean people don't desire to be famous. A recent poll found that 54% of Gen Z said they'd like to become an influencer or a content creator, and 86% expressed interest in earning money through content creation. With fewer people desiring the Hollywood lights with each generation, it's probably fair to wonder if those who are in the business of making movies right now might be the most narcissistic crop of actors yet. What other kind of person would actively seek out a career where exposing every moment of your entire life for attention is the norm? In modern times, most people are aware that anything they say online is recorded and therefore open to scrutiny. And social clout is paramount, whether it's an individual celebrity or the studio and corporations paying their wages. If a corporation thinks something an actor in one of their films has said something that would jeopardize public perception of that film, let alone the company itself, then that actor is a cog in the machine and is a sacrificial lamb, a preemptive strike before the public gets to vote with their dollar. Some actors, or we can call them actresses if you want to be old-fashioned, and by that I mean like 2016. Some actors were fired by their studios and effectively canceled for their speech. Others have been allowed to say whatever they want because it aligns with the corporate ideology, and the market has decided their fate. I've found it interesting to note that no matter how one of these careers stumbled, it was often started by their speech and utilizing their platform, which they have every right to do. But one way a career hits a roadblock seems more fair than another. For example, I think it's fair to say Rachel Zegler has had a negative impact on her own career, and people are voting with their wallets by not showing up to her films or making Disney reshuffle the release date for the live-action Snow White. The studios paying her haven't fired her for her stirring controversy around their films, because what she's saying is in line with company credo. But Melissa Barrera was recently fired from Scream 7 before principal photography began for her comments on the Israel-Hamas conflict, with Jenna Ortega's exit quick to follow in what's rumored to be quiet solidarity. I'm not making a statement on what Rachel said. It's just always interesting to me to see how studios react to political statements by actors starring in films they have hundreds of millions of dollars invested in. It's within their rights to get rid of a problem if it's going to affect their bottom line. But getting rid of an actor based on political statements isn't pro-bottom line when either way it's going to alienate or at the very least look bad to half of your audience. That is, assuming a corporation would want as broad of an audience as possible. And that includes people of every race, gender, religion, or political affiliation. Or so the thin veil says. So assuming getting rid of someone for the egregious offense of having an opinion is stupid and unhelpful, it seems like it's better to not decide what the public thinks, but let the public tell you what they think. And not just the vocal minority on Twitter, or X, or fucking whatever Elon. The side that votes with their wallets is filled with people who actually show up to the movies. The ones who vote with their mouths don't even go to the movies that are pandering to them. Remember bros? There will be no way to prove anything, and it's mere speculation from here on out, but it's hard for me to believe that if the market was allowed to dictate the fate of Scream 7 after Melissa Barrera's comments, I don't think its box office would be impacted very much. I think it would most likely be brushed off as an actor saying something controversial, and there would be another worst person in the universe tomorrow, just like there always is. But this is a panic button virtue signal flare gun moment from a studio deciding to turn an ember into a volcano and potentially annihilate their newly revived franchise through controversy and an unintended need to reboot and retread all over again. Let's take a look at how some recent careers have fared after considering their controversial or tone-deaf utterances, starting with Rachel Zegler. Zegler is the quintessential Gen Z movie star. She just started her career, but comes off entitled, holier than thou, and contradictory. I know that kind of describes most of Hollywood, but everyone has their own brand of that description. She's turned into a walking, talking oof machine, a conveyor belt of cringe, if you will. There is definitely a bit of recency bias, but I'm hard-pressed to think of anyone else who's done as much damage to not just their own career, but a film they are starring in with just words other than Rachel Zegler. She started the year with a bomb when the Shazam sequel landed in theaters. After it flatlined with audiences, she didn't stay quiet and humble about the movie. No. She went on the offensive, saying she only took her role in the film because of the pandemic raging at the time, and her not knowing when she'd get work again. Nice endorsement, Rachel. But that was nothing compared to when she became the focal point of criticism surrounding Disney's live-action Snow White remake. See, Disney has released nearly 24 live-action remakes of its classic animated films because they're out of fucking ideas. I mean, they're making something for the new generation. The movie was already a point of mockery on social media when it leaked that the dwarfs in Snow White had been replaced by a merry band of politically correct fairy tale creatures, so as to not offend little people. If that wasn't bad enough, Rachel Zegler started to talk. She made it clear that she would be serving every modern cultural progressive platitude in order to virtue signal her elitism all over anyone's unsuspecting ear canals. From being dismissive of the original film and talking about how she didn't even like it, to suggesting it was an inferior story requiring a modern update, where the prince could be cut for all he matters now, and that Snow White would be pursuing every female empowerment cliche imaginable.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird. So we didn't do that this time. It's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess until 2024. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut, who knows?
This sort of thing might have worked 6 or 7 years ago, but it seems like no one told Zegler people don't tend to like virtuous actors who star in bad movies to tell them how things need to be. The PR disaster continued. It's like she couldn't stop herself. At this point, Disney had no choice but to push the film's release date back in an attempt to salvage the project. Kinda like Warner Brothers did with Ezra Miller and The Flash. And how'd that work out?
Hi. Always just knock you out and then you won't have to panic.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
We'll get to that situation in a bit. Because Zegler was saying all the things Disney had been empowering its actors and employees to say for the past several years, there was no way Disney was going to fire her. But the mockery was palpable and the company found itself trapped in a corner. It couldn't have been a more perfect storm of events because the actors' strike in Hollywood meant Zegler would be making headlines again when she came off smug and entitled when discussing actors' compensation.
I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess. I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
Zegler suffered another bomb later this year with the Hunger Games prequel movie. An actress starring in mediocre films telling everyone what to think. It played out exactly how you expect. She's issued half-hearted apologies that have also been mocked. Time is going to tell with Rachel Zegler, but things are not looking good just a year in. Another person whose career has stumbled over the last several years has been Brie Larson. Rachel Zegler might have done all this in less than a year, but Larson's been around longer and this has been a slow devolution of a pretty solid actor's career. It started after an Oscar win and being cast as Captain Marvel during the height of the MCU's popularity. This was all happening during a time when the Me Too movement was sweeping the culture, so naturally Brie felt a little entitled to say what is some pretty goofy things in hindsight, suggesting she doesn't need to hear what straight white men have to say about things that weren't made for them.
I do not need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him about A Wrinkle in Time. It wasn't made for him. On top of all of this, am I saying that I hate white dudes? No, I'm not. And I'm also saying I don't hate white dudes.
This was, of course, in reference to A Wrinkle in Time, which, hey, is fair to say, right? Except when that sort of thinking comes back and bites you in the ass and you have to have a taste of your own medicine. Like the Marvels absolutely bombing this year. Before that catastrophe, Brie's Captain Marvel was a fine representation of her demeanor in interviews, entitled and looking bored.
It wasn't all fleshed out yet with the Captain Marvel solo film either, so it was just kind of finding our way, but it was a good group of people to figure it out with, right guys?
Yeah.
Isn't it fun being there for all my extra takes?
Signed you up.
Would Brie Larson work out? Like, hypothetically, would I at some point? Is that like a personal attack or something? Or is that a request? Do you think I should? Yeah, I work out a lot. Thanks for asking.
It helped Captain Marvel become one of the most disliked characters in the MCU. And her own words came back to bite her when she was shifted to co-lead to the sequel of her own billion-dollar original. Mocking or pointing out contradictions in Brie Larson's interviews has become low-hanging fruit at this point. After years of seeming to dig her heels in, an interview from the summer of 2023 saw a deflated Brie Larson ask in earnestness if anyone even wanted her back as Captain Marvel when asked if she'd be returning.
How long will you play Captain Marvel for?
I don't know. Does anyone want me to do it again?
Don't be so modest.
I don't know. I really don't know.
She's become a co-lead in almost everything now, starring in commercials and becoming a cast member in the Fast and Furious franchise. Brie Larson is still an incredibly well-known actress and is quite talented, but she hasn't produced anything noteworthy in years, and that's compounded with her easily mockable diatribes years ago. Now I'm almost rooting for her, because she's really good when she wants to be, and I don't want to see people fail. In my opinion, that's the mindset people should generally have toward these things. As long as it's not an extremely egregious offense, what's the point in constantly punishing someone, especially if they're putting out something worth your time? That's cancel culture. Don't do that. Melissa Barrera is set to reprise her role as Sam Carpenter in Scream 7, after finally landing a starring role in a major hit film with the 2022 Scream Soft reboot. She had been working in Mexico for years before landing the lead role in the resurrected Scream franchise. That is, until she decided to say what a corporation deemed the wrong thing. Not the public, but a corporation. She's this year's Gina Carano, to summarize. There's no second chance or meeting with her, it was just an announcement that she was dropped from the project. Now, this reminds me of Disney dropping James Gunn from Guardians of the Galaxy 3 over some controversial comments. It's not exactly one-to-one, but you get my point. You'd think at some point studios would stop doing these things so abruptly, but they don't. The James Gunn situation was years ago, the Barrera situation is now, and studios are still coming off as impulsive in their decisions. There are some other actors who spring to mind when it comes to controversy and impulsive decisions, and for various reasons. Kevin Spacey was dropped by everyone he was associated with professionally when allegations of sexual misconduct surfaced and he was slapped with a lawsuit. He was found not guilty earlier this year, but his career is in the shitter regardless of what happened in the courtroom. In the court of public opinion, he's guilty. His prior work forever tainted because of the severity of the allegations, and we see this happen time and again. Jonathan Majors has also been dropped from multiple projects after he was arrested for allegedly assaulting a woman in New York. The highest profile projects out of all the actors talked about in this video belong to Jonathan Majors, who is positioned to be Marvel's new big bad as Kang the Conqueror, who's supposedly more powerful than Thanos. I don't know about that, he was beaten by fucking ants, but I digress. The next Avengers movie's subtitle is Kang Dynasty. That's how much Disney was trusting this guy. And we'll see how it plays out. Who knows, it might be a Kevin Spacey situation, or it might be proven 100% true, and Disney was right to drop him, but only time will tell. And of course, we have Ezra Miller, but that's an insane situation because the offenses are so egregious, the controversy is the fact the studio didn't let him go. We're not talking speech in words like Zegler or Barrera. We're talking actual assault that was caught on film, theft, and other things that rhyme with Amy Schumer. If anything, Miller is an example of how far companies will go to toe the ideological line even when hundreds of millions of dollars are on the line. Miller was and still is a tornado of controversy, but Warner Brothers refused to fire him and tried to distance the film from Ezra headlines by pushing the film back repeatedly. Who's to say just how much Miller's actions affected the box office for The Flash? But it's hard for me to believe what he did isn't a fireable offense. Yet Melissa Barrera's statements aren't worth signing her to Scream 7 and is worth scrapping and starting from scratch. The Ezra Miller situation exemplifies everything wrong with Hollywood's approach to controversial situations. There's an overreaction when there's a potential threat to the ideological spine of the company. But one like Warner Brothers did everything and anything it could to avoid accepting accountability and navigated the PR nightmare with a used car salesman mentality, assuring people Miller was getting the attention he needed while ignoring actual victims of Miller's activities. Now, aside extreme cases like Miller's and more like a situation concerning Barrera, what's missing from this conversation is something of a bottom line. I think quality will triumph over anything. Quality will trump controversy. Results matter over method. When it comes to art, as long as people aren't actually being harmed, the ends justify the means. And I don't mean harmed like the Twitter warrior, this statement is harmful to the insert protected community here kind of harm. That's all to say, people can be eccentric or say stupid things and make mistakes, but if they're putting out high quality work, the public generally forgives them and people move on. We can separate the art from the artist. That is, if the artist is providing us work worth separating. I think when things are at their most balanced, the market dictates whether people succeed or fail, not corporations being guided by whatever the way they feel the political wind is blowing. People are involved in their own lives and don't have enough of a shit to give if the star of Scream 7 said something about a topic half the audience just learned existed 6 months prior. Is the movie good? That's what most people are worried about. It's when the idiotic comments are in your face and come off smug and insufferable that it starts to become a compounding effect when it's being spoken by someone who's not doing good work.
Oh, the actress from Scream 6 said what? Yeah, but she's pretty good in it, and I like that movie.
Compared to,
that actress from Captain Marvel said what? Her acting's flatter than Hiroshima, and that movie was ass.
Which film sequel between those two has a better chance of success? Say controversial things, just back it up with good work and let the market decide. If only movie studios would make things that easy.
How often are you in line for the Snow White ride?
I'm a narcissist.